All right. Hello, everyone. I'm obviously Jesus, and I have a guest with me today. His name is Drift0r. You might have heard of him. He makes good Call of Duty videos about weapons and whatnot. But anyway, he had a video on his channel today talking about religious people, and I guess I'll turn it over to you to give a little bit of summary of what that was, and
Okay.
we'll talk.
I did a dual commentary with Daily Noob Poner to discuss religious people and religion in general. And it was kind of funny because I identify myself as Christian, maybe more of a lazy, liberal kind of Christian, but Christian on the same. And he did too, but he really didn't like Christians. Like, he liked his religion, but not religious people. So it was kind of odd that I was defending myself against one of my own, if that makes any sense. And of course, the comments turned into a giant flame war all the way down. And about halfway in there, I noticed, obviously, Jesus here leaving one comment, and I'm like, whoa, dude, I almost missed you there. We should do kind of a counterpoint to this, because a lot of people wanted to see a counterpoint. They said basically that I was too afraid to discuss with an atheist on my channel or something like that.
Yeah, you seem pretty reasonable in that commentary, but I think that the topic of religious people is something that kind of is always going to start a flame war, no matter how tangentially you mention it on YouTube. I can't even imagine what that comment section's like now.
Oh, God, it's incendiary. That's like the best word for it. The sad is, it
Yeah,
was getting comments, like the video is 20 minutes long. It was getting comments about 1 to 2 minutes after it went up, just rage all the way down.
yeah. I guess to some point, religious people can be, um, toxic and obnoxious and very acidic to people because I went to church with my ex girl. Well, no, that would be never mind. That would be a double negation. But I went to a couple girlfriends ago, I suppose, to measure time in terms of people. I went to church with her because she was like really pretty much not practicing. But I went once with her, and I looked around church and I could kind of just get this idea that everyone there was there for, because they were dying or because they were sick or because they didn't like themselves particularly much. Because I can admire some parts of religion in some certain ways, but I take objection to a lot of the self-loathing that goes on because you see, especially like the idea of original sin. So from the beginning, from your birth, you're hooked and you're supposed to be part of this endless cycle to redeem yourself when you never really can do it until you die. So it's like they've got you for life. And I think that attracts a certain type of people who are dying or people who don't particularly care for themselves.
Original sin, it's a completely different topic, but as far as attracting desperate, sad, old people, as much as I don't like to say that's true, that's true. That's true in way more churches than it should be. I've been to many, many churches. I moved around a lot. Family didn't always get along where they went, so we'd have to shop around in a town. And I would say that 9 times out of 10, that was what the congregation was like. There were a few really nice churches full of young people that seemed more happy to be there than they were worried about why they should be there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you said your grandfather in that commentary you did that you were talking about. You said your grandfather was just this horrendously sort of hostile person.
Not to me, well, not physically because he was too old to move around for the most part. I do remember him beating my grandmother across the face with a belt a little bit when I was a child. But the thing about it was that very easily illustrated that these awesome people in church aren't necessarily that awesome. Or to expand on the story there, what happened was he was a very, very angry man, but he was from a time where social conformity was more important than anything else, fighting the Nazis in World War II, the Depression, that sort of thing. But even still, very angry, even compared to people of his time. And what happened was they were having some sort of luncheon in the church, and there were girls in my youth group, and me being about 13 or 14 years old. Anything that has a pair of breasts and makes a request of me, I'm going to try and fill. So these girls, they're like, "Hey, you want to go get me some breakfast from the luncheon?" Okay. So I go in there and I ask the old ladies in there if I can have any food for the youth group. Oh, they're offended. This is not appropriate. Blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay. Well, I just open up the refrigerator. I'm like, "Has anybody eaten this ham in here?" No answer, no nothing. Like, whatever. I'll get a little piece of ham and bring it back. Some guy pulls me out of the church youth group, who happens to be another World War II veteran, a man that served his country in Japan, damn near lost his arm, among other things. And he told me what I did was disrespectful, rude, and that I shouldn't be in this church, and that if I do it again, he's going to unglue my ass and plaster it all over this hallway and that sort of thing. Small church, word gets around. you would think that if somebody threatens your child in church, they would take the opposite opinion and be hostile toward them, or we need to leave. It was quite the opposite. The opinion of my grandfather was that I was a shitty person, that I shouldn't have done that, that he'll help kick my ass and all that. And it escalated all the way into the proper Sunday dinner where my grandmother pulled out a fork and threatened to stab him in the face in the restaurant, or the throat. I can't remember which one. So I don't know. Where were we going with this?
I don't know. I think I was talking about how I was good. I sort of brought up the topic of your grandfather because I wanted to ask if you thought that there might have been a correlation between that mentality that people are in church for the wrong reasons and his hostility. But now it sounds like it's more the war that made him.
He was a Coast Guard. He blew up sharks.
Okay, so maybe not.
No,
But
no. The other guy, maybe I could understand more. But it's the. I guess the point I could make is that if you take any group of people, like what I try to talk with Daily New Poners, like atheists, I think that might be you don't call them a religion, it's the largest belief group in the world, maybe, or maybe Christian, or maybe Muslim. They're all hanging around like 1 billion people. With 1 billion people, you're going to find plenty of all types of people in every group.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely goes down to the individual level, and that's why, I mean, looking at things like, I mean, I don't see, well, I mean, I see race in terms of actually just observing a person's skin color, because you can't really avoid that, but, I mean, to think of people as members of a group is kind of silly when you try to discriminate against them, so I really can't go out and say that all Christians are horrible people because a couple of them do that. So, you're a Christian, and I'm talking to you right now, I think we're pretty good
Yeah, we did
amigos.
shows and stuff in the past. I'm pretty sure you knew already, or even if you didn't, it's not like anything has changed. But the thing, yeah, you knew. I think I actually saw you on Reddit posting on XJaws when XJaws was talking about how he didn't want to be an atheist, or he was worried everybody was going to unsubscribe, silly things like that. But would you not admit that it's a human, non-religious, we're going straight scientific, how would I say, scientific, sociological, and what's the word I'm looking for? Damn it, come on. The word, I just used it. I was arguing with Pone Star about this. Now I'm feeling stupid. What's it when you, anthropological thing that people identify in groups and out groups very differently. And even people like me and you that know that the differences are slim, when you see somebody that's not yourself, your first unconscious core gut reaction is, this is not me, this is something different, I don't like this, blah, blah, blah. And you have to think your way around it.
There's a psychological actual dichotomy that's between what is called the self and what is called the other, and the other is everything that is not identifiable with the self. So, I mean, your possessions might be seen psychologically as part of yourself, but everything that is not you or yours is considered them and theirs. So there's this natural human tendency to sort of divide between people. And I think that also, while we're on the topic of psychological tendencies, that God making or thinking about gods and generating as a society gods to believe in is another thing that happens, because there's been studies that show that because from the earliest days of time when people couldn't explain what the hell was going on, the sun rising and setting, they needed explanations. And I think that helps kind of understand where religion comes from too.
Oh yeah, I've read all about that. I think that's fascinating to read about, which is, I guess, what puts me apart from a lot of other people in my faith. That pisses them off like crazy. Or like did you see this study where it said that people that identified strongly with core brands, and I think the Apple was the big example that they used, that the type of cognition going on in their brain or perhaps the chemicals themselves were almost identical to what was going on with highly religious people when they saw a religious artifact or heard a religious story.
I did not see that, but I would believe it. I mean, that makes sense because you have these people who idealize these brands and all these hipsters walking around with their Macs and iPads and iPods are actually decent
Down
things,
with the corporations posted from my iPhone. Or you might actually like the book American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit I don't really read too much very thick, I would say, important literature. Neil Gaiman kind of writes sci-fi, and he wrote this thing called American Gods, where they have all the old gods, all the Norse pantheon, all those little references to Christianity and Islam here and there, and they have to fight out with the new American gods, because we Americans have the god of the railroads, the god of the internet, the god of TV, the god of celebrity, and this and that.
Huh. Sounds interesting, although my sci-fi taste is typically more along the lines of Asimov and whatnot. But
Also very cool.
Norse gods are the shit. To be honest, that's what I mean. I don't believe in any of that, but I still have the capacity to find all those tales that they invented very, very amusing and
Entertaining. What?
yes,
You don't worship Thor? What? Thor's Day?
I
You mean Thursday?
Odin said he would end all ice giants. I see no ice giants. Praise Odin.
Yeah, I find things like that funny. I think that's great stuff.
But yeah, I mean, I think that all cultures need their gods, and I think that to some degree, and I don't mean to offend you or your beliefs. I think that while there's things like in Norse mythology that I can really admire, that a lot of Christianity inherently deals with like self-denial and self not mutilation, but self sort of loathing. Because you look at what was that story in the Old Testament? Cain and Abel, or no, was it Cain and Abel where the father has to kill his own son?
No, 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 no.
No,
That
that's not Cain and
was
Abel. I'm drawing a blank
I
on
think
this
that
shit.
was Elijah. I hope we have time in this commentary. Maybe a quick edit for Wikipedia. I can't remember the name of the man, but God told him to take his son up to the mountain and sacrifice him as
Yeah,
a proof of faith.
I mean, that's the type of stuff that I don't like about Christian
Well,
mythology.
you do remember how that story ended, right?
Yes, because God spares him eventually, right?
Yes, he says that you're a faithful man. You even decided to obey this most burdensome command. I don't need you to kill your son. And as per Jewish tradition, he did have to make a sacrifice, and God arranged for two like goat to wander by, and he sacrificed that instead.
I mean, but even though it doesn't end with him killing his son, I think that the idea that you're supposed to come to a point mentally where you're ready to kill your son, even if it doesn't actually wind up happening, and that's supposed to be love, is kind of it just seems so counterintuitive to me. So, I mean, do you feel that that's a good thing or a good story or an inspiring story as a Christian? Because
I don't know
I
about
just
inspiring. A lot of these older stories, I don't, this is going to sound awful. I don't like the version, the canonical version. If you read into the history of the stories, there's some really interesting stuff. But it's supposed to be how, I'm trying to think of the right words here because choosing my words is important. A story about the love of God, his understanding, his plan, his all of these other words that you've heard very frequently, superseding everything else, and that by faith alone everything will be okay. And because the man did have such great faith and he was prepared to go to such horrible lengths for God, that God took care of everything for him, and it was good. Although one story I'd like to tell is the story of Job. Do you remember that one?
I do not. My Bible is. I mean, I read a good part of the Old Testament, but the stuff is kind of came to me secondhand. So you
Okay.
can go ahead.
I don't like the Old Testament too much. I really like the New Testament. I read the first little four books just with Jesus quite a bit. But the Old Testament, there's the story of Job, and Job is the most pious man in all his land. He believes in God more than anybody else. And as the story goes, God and the devil are just kind of chilling in heaven, and God says, "Look at my man Job. He'll never doubt me." And the devil says, "Oh yeah, I bet I can make him doubt you." They make a little bet. There's not even mention of what it was bet. And God says, "Okay, devil, you can do whatever you want to Job. You can punish him and all his family and everything, and he'll always love me, I promise you. But you can't kill him." Okay. And they go through, as per those old stories, the Trinity. Three different things happen to him: he loses families, cattle. He becomes homeless, afflicted with diseases and horrible things. It's not a pretty good story. And then he still worships God no matter how bad he suffers. And in the end, God says, "You're a faithful servant," and he brings everything back, and everything's hunky-dory. And but if you look at the historical version of that text, that last little bit wasn't actually how it ended. It was added on. What is in our Bible, or my Bible, is when you read the story, Job begins to self-doubt near the end, and all of his three friends tell him, "This is ridiculous. God's letting you suffer. You need to junk this God and come on board with our gods." He says no. And he starts to self-doubt, and he starts to pray and he asks God, "Why? What have I done? I've always been faithful to you. Why? All these things happen to me." And in quite a rare feat, God himself comes down, and they have a very short exchange, and God basically tells him, "I'm God. Who are you to question me?" And the words that were used, that I am on such a ridiculously different plane than you are, that by my thought you exist. Why do you question me? Which I thought said quite a lot. Even though it is not the positive, happy light that everybody likes, I thought it was very insightful.
Now, I mean, I think that that story and the story we're talking about, where the man has to sacrifice his son, is not so much. good because it shows you that God will make everything right, or that God is above you. Well, I think it's bad because it shows that God is above you. It shows that God plays games with you and He is above reproach. I mean, we wouldn't like it all too much if somebody came up to you and punched you in the face and said, "Hey," and you turn to him and say, "Hey, why? Why did you do that?" And he says, "Who are you to question me? I am so much better than you that you don't have to answer me." And I think that it's kind of
Like if
just,
Superman just came and punched you in the face, and he's like, "Lol, what are you going to do about it?"
yeah, you'd think that guy was an asshole no matter who he was.
Yeah,
So I mean that's kind of the sort of tough love thing that I never really understood about such a popular religion. I mean,
yeah.
and why I think it attracts people who have a penchant for self-loathing, because you have these people who want to be subservient and to serve God, who thinks that He is above all and above question. And no matter what version you read, you have even Jesus who says that I will turn the father against his son and the son against his father, when he's talking about how he's going to convert people to not necessarily Christianity, but to sort of following the New Testament versus the Old. And
Hmm.
so Jesus is typically seen as this peaceful Messiah, but even in just his words, he has some very vitriolic stuff about turning people against the non-believers. I mean, it's all
Yeah, he
about
says,
God
"When I
over
come
everything.
back, I'll be coming back with a sword."
Yes, yes.
Yes, I've read a lot about that. That's another kind of interesting thing. Depending on which gospel you read, you know that there's four gospels, I think, or three, sorry, and they Matthew, Mark, and four, and they tell the same story but from different authors. What you'll find is the least involved or the newest tends to paint Jesus as the more hippie type, and the further you go back into the like the authors that were actually there, what they wrote, they have a much more angry Jesus. My personal favorite was Stealth Jesus. I really can't remember what part of the story. It's like one of his miracles was walking out of a temple unseen, except one of the translations I read, it was hilarious, like him sneaking out the back, or the temple of the story of Jesus overturning money changers in the temple and like beating their asses and throwing them out on the street, which I thought was pretty cool.
But I mean, to go back to Job for a second, do you believe that actually happened?
I honestly don't care if it happened or not, if that makes any sense to you. As part of my faith, I'm supposed to believe the entire Bible. I would say that that could have happened. I do believe in God and all these other things, so I say that could have happened. I say that could have also been a very highly allegorical story. It could have been literally a Sunday school thing that somebody wrote that some other dude decided to stick in the Bible for reasons I don't even understand. So it's not something I spend a lot of time worrying about, although many other people spend a lot of time worrying about those kind of
Hmm.
things.
I mean, when I heard you tell your very abridged, abbreviated version of it, it just struck me that when you deconstruct it into its simplest form, just for quick telling, it really is kind of just like an Aesop fable. You have the three, and the whole concept of three, the three things that happened to
Oh, the
Job has
Trinity. Oh,
been.
yeah, 3, 7, sometimes 4, 13 is maybe the. I can't remember the. It's a Jewish thing. The way their letters and their some of their letters looked a lot like their writing. So like 666 is actually very similar to 777, or the good and the bad numbers, but with a strike through it. And they do lots of little things like that in their writing. And they probably did. They might, or probably I say that just because when I read it historically, which I do, I troll the shit out of Wikipedia. A lot of those stories seem to come from older sources, like the life of Jesus mirroring like Mithras, or a couple of Egyptian gods, and a lot of little things like that, or not
Mm,
little things, just tons and tons of tons. It's human nature.
but that makes me wonder. I mean, you seem like a pretty reasonable person, but I wonder if you're able to say that you acknowledge that this guy might have stuck a fable into the Bible as part of Sundays, as part of some early form of Sunday school, because I mean the Bible was translated by hand. But
Yeah.
if you realize that, then I don't understand. What I don't get is why you don't doubt more of it. You don't doubt even the most basic tenets of it, like the divinity of Jesus or
Oh,
the
it would be
existence
a
of.
complete lie to you if I sat here and say that I wasn't doubting things, or full of doubt, or questioning, or confusing. That's one of the things that I really don't like about the mainstream of my particular faith, is everything. Oh, doubt is, oh, if you're doubting, that's bad. You're going to go to hell. You don't doubt. I think it should be the opposite. That if you doubt, you can reaffirm your doubt. It's if you're not doubting, if you're not thinking, something is wrong. If you're not the reason I would say that I have faith is because, I mean, if it were so clear that there were no reason to doubt it, then there would be no reason for the to have faith in something like that. Does that make any sense?
I mean,
I'm starting to ramble, maybe.
I just had a bit of a confusion with the way you worded it, but I mean, I understand that. So what you're essentially saying is that why do people doubt it if there isn't some sort of truth? Whereas there has to be black to define the white, so to speak. But
Yes, I mean, even, okay, let's say, sure, I hope I'm not going out on a wrong hymn. Surely you're not one of the people that's going to sit here and tell me that Jesus never existed.
no, no.
Okay.
There is ample evidence to show that there was a person called Jesus.
Yes, and I've seen a lot of people argue that fact that Jesus never existed at all. I've read that, and it is honestly, I think that's a bit of a stretch. I would find it unlikely that these things would exist around a person that didn't never existed at all. But the core of the Bible for me, as my faith, it's not probably not the same as anybody else's, any person on this planet, is the New Testament. Which, if you haven't read, I know you said you haven't. I would really appreciate if you just sit down and read the first like 4 chapters of the New Testament, which is the life and times of Jesus, and the rest of it I don't worry about very much. I find a lot of wisdom in the things that Jesus said.
Well, I mean, I would not doubt that. I mean, things like, the Ten Commandments even are things that, if you follow them, regardless of your belief in a divine power, they will bring you a, fairly good life. I mean, obviously there's a commandment about worshiping no gods before God, but I mean, even if you just follow the secular parts of the Ten Commandments, you'll have an okay life. So I mean, I don't doubt that there's wisdom or good sound advice in any religion. I just think that when you dissect it and look at the political or then the socioeconomic climates in which these things existed, and you talked about in your commentary with what's his name, Daily Newponer,
Hmm.
that's a that you talk about you have to understand contextual Jesus and
Oh yeah, very different than what we have. I used to have a poster in my room that had what we had original Jesus on one side. It was like this old Jew out in the desert that was all burned up with sunburn and hanging with some stones. And then on the right side, it had Jesus with a bunch of E's, and he was like wrapped in an American flag with a machine gun and a baby and all this kind of stuff. Very
ah,
different.
yes, but I mean, like I see that there's wisdom in the Bible, but when you understand the cultural times in which it existed, and all like from the Old Testament to the New Testament, I can't help but say that these are guidelines, and that the people with power wanted to subject these guidelines or impose them upon people, and they used God as a justification because
Throughout
there were.
history, that's what you'll see. The originator of the ideas, however, I'm always going back to Jesus, that's my faith, whatever. He was not empowered. I don't know if you remember, they crucified him. They killed him in the worst way they possibly could because they didn't like anything that he had to say because contextual Jesus was very anti-mainstream. However, through time, his ideas caught on, and unfortunately, were very, very greatly abused by more people than you could probably fit in a 1,000-page book.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the Catholic Church; they pretty much have a king, and they have all this protocol and all. Yeah, and it's
God.
utterly absurd. And I think that the Catholic Church is one of the last surviving examples of how good advice and good teachings and sound just guidelines for how to live life have been turned into an objective. Infallible system. So I mean, I would never say that there's not a little bit of good in every religion because why else would it have caught on? But I think that the justification is a lot of scare tactics about going to
Yes,
hell.
oh, I agree with you, and that's the saddest, saddest thing. It makes me so sad to think about. Everybody believes in God only because they want to get something out of it. I believe in God because I don't want to go to hell. I believe in God because I want Tim Tebow to win football. I believe in God because I want something. Shit doesn't work that way. You don't believe something because you want it to be real. You believe it because you think it is real. If I wanted, man, I just invent my own religion, man. I'm gonna live forever and be king of the universe and fly on a magic space horse through time, and I'm gonna believe in it. It's become real. No,
Yeah, and that's the sad part. But I mean, I just don't see that when you. I mean, you seem like what I would define as a reasonable Christian. I just don't see why you need the supernatural aspect to be reasonable. Because to me, when you are as realistic with your faith, and you allow yourself to doubt that faith, I don't see why you can't just take the good parts and remove the divinity. I'm not saying you. That's. I'm not trying to convert you here, but I just don't get. I think that you're at a point where when I look at your belief system, I don't see any explicit need for a divine power for it to be as effective as it is now for you.
that's kind of one of the reasons I like it. Even if I'm completely wrong about this whole divinity thing, at least Doing pretty okay.
No one's going to dispute that. I mean,
If you want to ask me why I believe in paranormal things or the definitive, that's a completely different. So have you seen some of the crazy shit I've been putting on my channel? People think I'm mentally ill. You do realize that, right?
no, I haven't seen this. Well, like, what have you been putting on there?
I have throughout my life, you're going to rail me out the ass for this one. I have seen crazy, ridiculous, paranormal things, demon possessions, floating objects. I have been hunted through years of my life and my dreams by a Jungian shadow. Do you know what that thing is? That is a whole world of clusterfuck that I wish I could forget every day. I'm terrified to go to sleep now because of that.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but a Jungian shadow is Carl Jung's idea of the self and the shadow self that would, ultimately lead to, changes in your life. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually Tool wrote a song about the Jungian shadow. But
Yeah, that's actually, I don't know if you remember the first time that I met you, I saw your name was Shadow, and that actually creeped me out because I was going through one of those bad episodes. But that is, if you read it, it shows up way more often than not in dreams and way more often than not in a very unpleasant form. And I had a very, very extreme case. I was getting like 2 hours of sleep a night for probably around a year, and it was one of the most awful experiences of my life. Imagine being hunted by yourself, like your evil doppelganger. Just terrible.
huh. You do have to link me to these videos because the only thing YouTube puts on my front page is your Call of Duty stuff,
Although
which
they're
is
pretty old. I hope you have a lot of spare time because I've probably done like 20 episodes of this, and it's like 20 minutes of what most people assume is just utterly mad ramblings.
oh no, dude, I am actually really interested in listening to this because I mean, the only
And think about it like that. Oh boy, we're going totally off of the faith here. Imagine if you could sit down in a room with your id, the most primal part of your ego, and have a little conversation.
that would be interesting, I
Now let's
suppose.
take that. Let's do one more thing. Let's imagine that this room is kind of like the game Left 4 Dead, where you're the player and the id is the director.
Oh man, that is very interesting from a psychological standpoint. But I mean,
Uh,
I don't mean to belittle how terrifying it must be for you because I mean, it's like I mean, from you telling it to me, it sounds interesting, but I'm sure that I would be shitting myself if I was actually in your
Yeah.
shoes.
Okay, this is going to make me sound even more silly. My first thought when this started, when it got really bad, as I sat there and I wondered if I was about to get demon possessed, if an actual demon was coming for me, and the first thing I said was just kind of counter to my religion. I was like no, that is even if I believe in God and Jesus and everything, that is the least probable thing that I could ever imagine happening. I'm going to a psychiatrist today. This is ridiculous.
Well, yeah, studies have shown that when people have, sort of hallucinatory experiences like that, the same parts of their brain activate when they're sort of in fits of religious rage. Like you see people speaking in tongues, or when you see, people convulsing in fits. That's the same part of their brain, that sort of primal urge that, it has to do with the language centers mixing with, what the most primal urges. And that's how you get fits of religious fervor. And that's how you get, the more secular kind of non-religious hallucinations like what you described to me. So, I think that
A
they,
non-religious hallucination like being abducted by aliens when it's much more likely to be sleep paralysis.
hmm, I have not heard about sleep paralysis and alien
Oh boy.
abductions,
Okay,
but
okay, okay. Let me go one more thing here. I've had this happen very, very rarely, probably about 4 or 5 times in my life. Sleep paralysis. You know when you go to sleep, your brain kind of like partially paralyzes your body, so that whatever you're dreaming, you're not going to like run out of bed or punch yourself in the face or poke your eyes out or something.
yeah.
Okay. What it also does is it shuts down your sensory perception, really nulls it down. So if you're sleeping on rough sheets or it's cold outside, you're not going to wake up. But what can happen is it's often when you're dreaming, you'll wake up, but your brain won't reactivate those sensory perceptors, so you're completely paralyzed and stuck in place. But since you can't feel anything, you also feel that you can't breathe. Like my lungs are breathing, but I can't feel them breathing, so I think I'm suffocating. And
Oh
no
God.
matter how scared you are, even though you're fully awake, your brain isn't necessarily going to restart this moving body until the sleep cycle finishes. And you're usually, half asleep, half awake, or in the middle of a dream. So people would wake up and be paralyzed in their sleep. Terrifying, awful thing to have happen. And because of their psychological state, they would be hallucinating like crazy. This is where the origin from the ancient demons, the incubus, the succubus, and a couple of other ones. And those old pictures, like you'd see of a little demon sitting on somebody's chest, sucking the breath out of them, that is exactly where this comes from, because they'd wake up and see these kind of things. And in the more modern world, now that we don't have demons anymore, people will wake up and not be able to move, and oh, the aliens have me paralyzed and they're going to experiment on me or something like that.
Huh. Well, I guess that makes sense because your brain has to rationalize everything somehow.
Hmm.
And I think, I think that all of human experience is just, well, I mean, not all of human experience, but all of humans' reaction to their experience is just their attempt to rationalize and make sense of every last bit. And that's where I think that, religion comes from. I think that's where hallucinations come from if you're in a certain mental state. I think that's where pretty much everything comes from, any belief system, even atheism, because atheism makes sense to me and your version of Christianity makes sense to you. So, I mean, the only thing human beings can do is to react in a way that they feel is appropriate based on their conditions. That's why I don't blame people for being Christians. I mean, I don't like Christians going around pushing their religion on people, but I mean, I can't blame them for how they ended up because that's what makes sense to them, regardless of what makes sense to me.
I would agree with that. You can still blame people for being dicks, though.
You can, although I am a determinist, so blame is very much pointless.
A
So,
determinist. Give me a second here. That's everything is predetermined. It's just going to happen. You can go travel backward, forward in time and see. It's all preset, kind of like a
well,
Laplace's demon.
well, I've never heard it equated to that, but I mean, essentially, determinists just believe that there is no self, there is no free choice, there is no free will.
Yeah,
It's,
that's
yes, yes.
Laplace's demon was a position for determinism that imagine a demon because it's very old, 1600s, 1700s, and he can see every position of every atom of every universe and every electron spin and quantum everything. He knows where it all is. Therefore, he can, with enough computing time, predict the past and present perfectly because he knows everything as it is. You can extrapolate it backwards and forwards, can't change it.
Yes, to know the variables. Yes, that so. And I never heard of Laplace's demon before, but Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher, said something very similar. If you could stop the wheel of the world and know everything and see all the little positions of the cogs, you would be able to know how everything was going to play out forever. But although the demon, how does the demon know that it knows all the variables? Can because you can never know that you know all the variables
And there's the
because
paradox.
yes, and that's why if there is a God, how does God know that there isn't a God above him? How
Oh,
is if it,
oh man, you're starting such a head trip. It doesn't. Once you start down that road, it just never ends. It just keeps going
hmm,
forever.
that which is why I believe that there are either infinite gods, making none of them worthy of worship because they're all equally insignificant, or zero gods, which is the position I take because Occam's razor, simplest thing, entities need not be multiplied unnecessarily,
Yes,
which is
that's
why I'm an
actually a very
atheist.
good tool for use. I get a lot of messages like that because I tell ghost stories on my channel. The crazy stories that I was very briefly mentioned, I turned them into 20-minute episodes, kind of like that dual commentary. Try to explain them as rationally as possible. And what happens is I'll get a message in my inbox. Hey, the other day, insert any one weird thing here happening. My dog was scared. The TV remote moved across the room. Something of religious value disappeared to me. Obviously, it's a demon. Obviously, it's a shadow person. What do I do about this? I'm like, how did you go from obviously a shadow person? What? What? Ah!
Yeah, I mean, I mean, again, it goes back to just wanting to make sense because these things don't like. It's just like, why does the sun rise? Why did this thing move across the room? Why did this iPod shut off randomly? They have to fill in something to make sense. And if they watch your videos, they're gonna say, "Oh, I have a Jungian shadow following me around and
Oh,
fucking
you
with
would
my
not
life."
believe how many messages. I try and help people like that. The advice that if anybody I think is real and not trolling, I'm like, look, you need to go see a psychologist. I'm not qualified to help in this at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good thing because you don't want to be giving people like horrible advice. And I made a commentary about that too because that's just like the whole advice giving thing on YouTube is just going way bad shit. But
Oh yeah, I tried to give it good. Even with the gun videos, that's hard enough because you get into the statistical analysis and stuff, and it can get a little bit more complicated than you think. People have different. Oh, what's more important, range or time to kill? Oh man, I don't know. Just too much, too much.
I would imagine they all interplay too. So yeah, if you shift one, it's kind of like linear programming. You shift one, everything else has to react too. So
Yeah, it's like they want the ultimate answer. What's better in every situation? And I'm thinking, with Call of Duty, you've probably got like 40 guns and huge ranges and different perks and stuff. The amount of variables that you have there means that certain things are going to be better than others, and it's way too many situations to calculate.
yes, indeed, that is. It's one of the many. It's like if we can't even figure out what the best thing is in Call of Duty because there's so many variables, how could we ever know? I mean, I'm a determinist, but I fully understand that I'll never be able to actually see it and know all the variables, so I kind of have to assume. So it's kind of like a religion. I mean, there's a bit of assumption because of the
I don't know
whole.
if I believe in determinism or not. That's a very complicated thing. I mean, read about. I forgot the name, but I do know quite a bit about it. But then there's also the part of me that wants to believe in chaos. Just sometimes things kind of happen. Just I don't, maybe it's just more of a personal experience. Like you ever have a really unusual day, maybe good or bad, and it'd be like 2 in the morning. You're halfway across the state, and you're like, how in the hell did I end up here?
I have never had that happen.
Oh,
It's all right though. I mean, there is an entire school of philosophy. It's not. I think it's Democritus. In response to Heraclitus, he said that there was, determinism, but there's a random swerve of atomism, and it accounts for certain random things like quantum physics. But I mean, I've always been convinced by the argument that the state of what things are right now absolutely determines the state of what things will be in the next moment. So I mean, it makes sense at
oh, it
both
makes beautiful sense. But when you get down to the quantum level, everything becomes probabilistic, which is one of the things I really don't like about quantum mechanics. That's one of the things a lot of people don't like about it. I'm not a physicist. I don't know what your major. I'm an engineer, so I got a crash course in all the sciences, and then a lot of focus on the more practical ones. I did do some quantum physics, but it was very brief, more like this is all you will ever need to know about quantum physics, just calculate these things, so I can't speak from a very educated position on it.
Well, I mean, it all comes down to the observer principle and how I mean, the whole existence of the field of quantum physics is dependent on humanity's inability to measure things at that precise a level. So I always side with the fact that humans are ignorant scientifically or incapable of creating technology to measure things rather than actually buy into what they have come up with in kind of the backwards way that they use the observer principle for. So I mean, I think that maybe one day we'll be able to figure out that things don't exist as probabilities because I mean, as a computer scientist, I believe that things either are or aren't, one or zero. So I mean, I kind
Well,
of
you
believe
haven't heard
in.
of quantum computing, where they could be one or zero, or this new 3D computing, where they can it just changes things a good bit. I don't remember quite how it works.
Oh, I got to look that shit up. No, I haven't heard of it.
Oh, either of them?
No.
Oh, you got to check out quantum computing because I'm not sure how it works, but supposedly a bit can be both 0 or 1 based on its need, and that just exponentially increases your computing power.
Huh.
I don't know if there's a working prototype yet or not. If there is, I'm assuming it's a very small scale one.
That is interesting.
Reading about it
Uh,
now?
I am. I looked on Wikipedia because it's not blacked out anymore. But this is. I don't have time to read it all right now, but I will check that out. But I mean, I still always will side with that the absolute division between one and zero. But I guess that's because I like things in black and white.
Well, you do know that they're. I'm gonna kind of. You do computer science? Is that programming or is that
Yeah,
like
yes, that's
hardware
programming.
science?
That's programming mostly.
Okay. Do you know anything about why it's a one or a zero hardware wise?
Because there is an electrical signal either being sent through it or not being sent through it, which gives it two values, two possible values, right?
Yes, but it's not absolute. It's not like you turn the circuit on or off. And in some instances, it can be a voltage that's it's just high enough to be a one, or at just the right range, or anything less than that's a zero. So you could have something that's like 70% and that's a 1, then you can have 80% and that's a 1, and then 90 and that's a 1, then it drops below 50 and it goes back to 0.
Hmm.
I might be thinking about something different because it's been a long time, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Well, in that case, I would say that obviously I don't think we're in that much detail, but if to respond to that specifically, I would just say that then we're not binary enough. We're not close down enough to be binary to get binary just yet.
Yeah.
But
Well, now how
I
the
don't know.
computer processes it, the brains of the computer, that's a 0 or 1, but on the physical,
Yeah.
absolute level, it's not. I don't think.
It's all just so it's we've covered a lot of stuff in
Yeah,
this conversation.
this is going to be a very long commentary.
Yes, it is. But I mean, long is good. I mean, if we're talking about stuff that's
Interesting,
interesting.
valid,
Mm,
important. We were supposed to do a dual commentary about time. Do you remember that one?
I do. I
Yeah,
do.
that never worked out because we were both late. How cute is that?
That is. Hmm. All right, to go back to religion.
Okay, let's all the way back to religion land again.
All the way back to religion. Although I suppose there are, religious arguments that and atheist arguments that go around quantum physics. But yeah, I mean, I
I
think
tend
at
to
the end,
avoid those.
yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to what, like I said, what works for you and what helps you make sense of the universe, because we're all perceiving the same things differently,
But
as far
acting
as I'm
on it
concerned.
very differently. There are people in this world of any group that would very gladly watch all the rest of them burn just because they're different.
Hmm. That's not good either way,
I mean,
because
that's true.
it is. I think that on many levels is just plain imprudent and counterproductive. But I've never understood murder, and that I mean there's
Oh, that's
some
because murder's fun. You didn't know that?
no. Well, I can say that. I mean, I'm sure there are people whose brains are wired to think that murder is just the best. It's the bee's knees.
Oh, yours should be. It's primal, it's brutal, it's bloody and glorious, and you're better than the other person because you're still alive. That's how it works.
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, I suppose, again, that's where determinism helps because you really can understand that at some level they're being motivated to, you know, sort of murder people. But I mean, I've always just liked a lot of religions because they're, I mean, on Christian side and Muslim side. And, I don't think, I mean, I'm not so big on Jewish history, but it seems like the Jews are more into social repression than actually killing people. But I mean, Islam's having their day right now as the violent religion. Christians had the Crusades, and
Dude,
Jews are all about repressing people. They hate Orthodox Jews are suppressing women in Israel right now.
you
So I
know
mean,
I've gotten death threats from Muslims, right?
really?
Yeah, the little if it were realistic videos that I make, they were all Call of Duty games, and you had Americans and like the Arab Alliance. So we would have our very generic terrorists out there, and they would say "Durka Durka," and we'd give them subtitles or make some little joke about suicide bombers, and I would get a bunch of death threats in my YouTube inbox. Somebody actually asked me that on my channel, "Why don't you bash on Islam?" And I'm like, I really just don't like getting a bunch of death threats, especially when all my information is public. I hate that.
Oh yeah, my mind hasn't ever hit out there because I don't have anything in the public domain that really is owned. So I mean, that's one of the beauties of living at home. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I avoided that. But my intro depicts the Prophet Muhammad being shot. So I have received my share of death threats too.
Yeah, that was pretty. I'm surprised you didn't actually get some legitimate action there, because you probably really pissed. I mean, you had Jesus getting run over by a bus, which
Yeah,
was pretty
so
bad too.
I mean, it's the point is that it's not supposed to be offensive to any particular religion. It's just going after the big
Well, it's not
two.
a particular. It's just all of them. It just don't offend everybody.
Mm. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. But I mean, it's a
Well,
good
not
thing.
everybody sees that. I mean, it's kind of one of those principles. Like the enemy of my enemy is my enemy. It would be like, oh, because I offended 2 people, nobody's going to be offended. Because I offended 40 people, nobody's going to think it's a personal attack. Shit does not work that way.
Yeah, I haven't received too many death threats because I think that most intelligent people would realize that I'm just going after religion, non-specifically. But there are people who choose to see, and it's funny because they always point out Muhammad and they forget about Jesus getting run over by the bus because I don't think it's any religion's place to tell me what I can and cannot depict. So
I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that, I was moderately offended. I was like, man, I would never have that as my intro. I was sitting there when we were talking about doing this dual commentary with time about time. I was like, it's gonna be awkward as hell when I tell him I'm not gonna do this video if I have a big picture of Jesus being crucified in the background as the watermark.
Oh
Which do
gosh.
you still do that?
As far as the watermarking, no, but I have that as my Facebook fan page's icon.
Okay. I mean, it's
Just give.
something I understand, but I do find it fairly offensive.
Well, I mean, I don't understand why though, because I mean, the Jesus is actually happy.
Yeah, well,
He's like giving a thumbs up.
you didn't make that because you knew that all the Christians would like it. Come on now.
Well, I actually didn't make that at all, but I kind of thought it would be funny. But
It is funny in a way. It's awful. I laugh at anti-religious jokes like Jesus riding a raptor. I find that hilarious.
well, I mean, I think that to some degree that if there's something that your religion makes you not able to laugh about, then I think that your religion is running your life into some small part at least because it's taken over your sense of humor and it's kind of just getting in there and making you less open to having a good time and laughing about something. So I
Well,
mean,
you ever see something kind of like on 4chan, the you laugh, you lose, and it's all these really offensive pictures, and some of them, they're really funny, but then you'll laugh and they're like, oh God, I'm a terrible person.
I have a warped sense of humor. So I've the only time I ever say I'm a terrible person is jokingly because I never have actually felt that I'm a terrible person for laughing at something because I find the world utterly absurd and I find everything worthy of ridicule, even myself. So I mean, I don't take myself too seriously, so
Well,
I
that's a
don't
good
take.
thing. But back to your channel, I got to ask you, how many people do you think your channel is smarter than any other channel on average?
Well, on not any other channel, but I mean, I think that generally I have subscribers who come to me for more, intellectual pursuits rather than, gameplay stuff. And gameplay is fine. I'm just saying that, they come not for the background, they come for what I'm talking about, which is typically stuff that you don't find anywhere
Yeah,
else.
but I
So, I
was
mean,
wondering, do you think you clean out too many of the people that I would say are unreasonable? Because like the video you watched on my channel, one of the reasons that I upload videos like that is to just kind of get rid of the bottom percent, the angry, the raging, unreasonable crew.
so I mean, with the religious video to sort of prune them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my intro does that.
Yeah.
I think my general attitude, just, I mean, if there's, I try to remain consistent in terms of my attitude on YouTube so that if people come along who are going to object to me, they're going to object to one video in the same way that they might object to another. So they're going to come out either way, and I can just, say goodbye. You don't belong here. I don't want you here. You're no good to me.
That makes sense. I'm in a very different boat because I'll sit there and I do gun reviews. They're statistics, they're numbers, they're very analytical kind of things. And then the next video we're talking about religion, and they're like, "What? No, no, no."
Yeah, I mean, my channel has gone through a lot of phases. I mean, I had the gameplay phase, and then the say random offensive shit phase, and now the sort of be more philosophical phase. And now I have a camera, so I have the
Gotcha.
camera
What was the most
phase.
offensive video that you ever made that you got the most flack about?
Well, there was this guy named Hard Eight Times who decided to, go after. He actually got me a flag on my other channel, the one I
Hmm.
don't use right now. But he actually got me a flag because I was just saying the N word over and over in Minecraft, which was kind of it was. I agree. Well, he didn't make this point, but I will admit that I went on with that whole shtick too long. But there was a point to it. The point was to offend people and make them realize that no matter what I say on this video, it doesn't hurt you. I mean, you go on with your life. So that was my point. But I
But you
think I
actually,
dragged
the
on.
flag actually processed, like it was a legitimate flag.
Oh yeah, I disputed it and yeah,
Did you
everything.
win?
Nope. I still have it on there for like a month.
Oh God, that's horrifying. Because I was actually just about to make a commentary where that word is used many times over.
Oh,
I don't know what word you said up there. I was born and raised mostly in the Mississippi Delta. This is like where the old timey 1% plantation, 200 slaves kind of place was.
oh,
So I grew up in the land of religious. I thought what was the word used? Dichotomies, just not religious. Sorry, racial, and it was ridiculous the things that I've seen. And I wanted to make a commentary about it. And there's literally no way to make a commentary about that without telling really awful stories and using
Well,
those words and stuff. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that don't understand context, and I'm worried about getting flagged.
yeah, I mean, obviously, and that's one of the things I like about my subscriber base because they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't. There wouldn't be a risk because I mean, I think I've said it. I say it a lot less now, but I think I've said it in like some like sarcastic, parodic sense. Like just say the slang version of it. But I mean, I think that when you have a fan base that might not be. I mean, I would feel trapped in that situation, and I wouldn't like it.
Well, I mean, it's a video I kind of want to make, but there's no unoffensive way to. I wanted to put like a giant warning at the beginning, like, "Hey, we're talking about really terrible stuff here. If you're going to get offended by any of these words," and I make a giant list, please just leave. I'm not trying to be a terrible person, but it's not a pretty picture.
I think that might work, and if even if it does get flagged, I think that if you sent it to YouTube and they watched the video and you disputed it, then they would say, "Hey, maybe this guy is just trying to use it in context." So I mean, you might
Well, I
have to
mean,
go through a
it's
bunch of
in
shit.
context, but it would be in context of real things that happened and some things that I've done and said in my life that I'm not particularly proud of.
I don't know. I mean, that's a gamble, but I mean, the warning thing may help. I mean, I've actually done that in videos where I say it now, just to say, hey, this is all jokes and for good fun. So don't be offended. It's not to be serious. So I mean, I think those disclaimers kind of help because they sort of tell YouTube that you were trying to be conscientious about what you're saying. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't know. It just kind of worries me because I mean, I'll tell stories about when I grew up a little and the things I saw. Like there were times of white people just really dumping on black folks, just really bad. And like, oh, you can talk about it now. Why didn't you do anything then? Because I was 5. Or I don't know. It worries me.
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm racist. My wife is Chinese. My best man was black, much against my family's wishes on both parts.
Really?
Yeah.
That's.
When I got married, my grandmother told me that I shouldn't have got a nigger boy to be my best man.
That's fucking horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know your situation with your family, but I would. I mean, I don't speak to my mother already for much less than that, and I would just be livid. I would never speak to people
It's
like that
something that
again.
doesn't worry me because how would I say it that she's racist without being hateful? She's racist because her husband died and she's terrified of like the black people that she sees on TV and they walk down the street and they dress the same and she thinks that everybody's out to get her and like puts iron bars on the house and she doesn't. I talked to her actually on Martin Luther King Day, and she's like, I really hate Martin Luther King because he did this and this and that, and he was a communist. But it just wasn't right how they used to treat black folks back in the 50s. They just treated them like dogs, and it just wasn't right. But then in the very next sentence, she'll say, "I wish these niggers would stop throwing trash in my yard."
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's just that disconnect there. So I mean, it's kind of sad. So I mean, I don't know. I would assume that you're better at dealing with that type of stuff because of where you were raised than I would. But I don't know. People who generally think in collectivist terms of race is chief among them just aggravate the living hell out of me. Because you can't look at a person as part of a group because they're not. They don't exist as part of a group. They exist as individuals, and some people might give themselves up to a group. In which case, I mean, I think that they're making a mistake. But in general, you just can't look at people like that just simply because of something like the color of their skin.
I actually had a good conversation about this with what was it? The best man, a friend of mine. His name is Chris. We went to college together. And he was telling me about how, like, his boss was telling him that all white people are racist, no matter what. And then he tried to explain to her that white people being racist is actually a racial stereotype of white people, and it just wasn't sinking in that something like that could be possible. Or how some other guy tried to tell him that this was kind of an awkward conversation, but it turned out good, as they were trying to tell him that, yeah, black people are statistically dumber. And he brought that up to me, and I was like, well, there is some truth to that. You look at intelligence scores, and the average black man's going to score about 97, 98, and then whites hang around 100, and then Asians 102, 103. And I'm like, you do realize that this isn't because black people are stupider, but because the tests are made by white people, and the average number is 100, and it was made for the average white man like 100 years ago.
Yeah, I
And I was
mean,
like,
you just gotta
sorry.
understand the. No, I'm sorry. You just gotta understand the context because I mean, like stereotypes. I mean, they all come about because of these little nuggets of what you can call truth. But I mean, like you just said, the truth is actually,
Yeah.
the white man's truth, essentially.
Or even a greater truth, even if that were true and the intelligence tests were perfect, do you think an aggregate difference of like 1 to 2 points out of I don't know how many millions of people in this world that you could just pick one person based on what race they are and say, oh, obviously this one Asian guy is going to be smarter than this one white guy because the averages are like a point or two different? No, no. When you average
Yeah.
that to millions of people, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference.
Exactly, and that's one of the things I like about determinism and binary things and thinking in ones or zeros because you can look at a person, but statistics don't matter because regardless of what the statistic says, they're not going to be 66% dumber or whatever the statistic is. They're going to be either dumber or smarter. They're going to be either above the line or below the
But
line.
if you believe in determinism, then you would believe that there's some metric by which you would know exactly how smart they are to somebody else in every situation. You just don't have the information.
Well, I do believe that there is a way to. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to knowing every single atomic positioning of every single atom in a person's brain, and also knowing what assemblage of atoms makes a smart person. So, I mean, I can never have access to that knowledge, but I think that it is, theoretically possible, although entirely inaccessible to human beings.
Completely impractical.
Yes.
And that's where we're going. We're kind of going back to God here. That's a lot of meta theory that I hear. I try to avoid these things, but have you heard all this stuff like what was before the Big Bang? What if God was a time traveler? What if God was something in the fourth, fifth, 10th, 12th dimension that could see all these positions and just knows everything? Or I'm sure you've heard a million different things like that.
And yeah, I mean, it goes back to like, how does God know that he has access to all the information? Because I mean, human beings, a lot of scientists, or a lot of old science at least, operates under the assumption that we know all the information, but obviously we don't.
Well, that's rarely true. A lot of the harder sciences, the more they're built around ideal models and aggregates and things like that. And to
Exactly.
do any exact situation, you need a lot more information than what we have. I mean, even good engineering, we build it around ideal models. That's why our pipes are round because they don't have kinks in them. That's why you see some of the same designs over and over because we know about this stuff. We don't have to build some radically new shape and apply a textbook worth of math to prove that it's better or worse. And
Yeah, I mean, it's just all these. I forgot where I was going with that. Sometimes it just happens to the old brain, I suppose.
yeah. There's also a lot of indoctrination. Here, we'll do
Oh,
in an
for
hour.
that.
This is going to be a multi-part commentary here for sure. Here's a comment that says, I'm an atheist because my parents are. You are a Christian because your parents are. And as much as I don't like for things like that to be true, I would say largely that's true. You go to Russia and you start looking for religious people who are under the Soviet Union that was repressed forever. You don't find too much. In the bigger cities in China, it's the same way. Out in the country, you find a lot of Taoism and things because that's how they were raised. And were you raised atheist, religious, spiritual parents? We celebrate Christmas, don't go to church. I don't know what your situation was.
Mine was half and half. I celebrated Christmas, did the holiday things, but I actually went to a Catholic kindergarten. But after that, I really went to public school, and my mother was religious and my father was not. So I mean, I was never it was never really forced on me, and I never believed in God. I don't think so. I had it relatively easy. I don't have one of those horror stories about being indoctrinated. So I mean, maybe I was just impervious to indoctrination because my brain doesn't work in the typical ways. Not to toot my own horn here, but I'm just assembled. I'm not a neurotypical, so to speak.
Okay, well, I mean, it's odd that your parents got along like that, which is
Oh, they
it's
didn't.
good.
They didn't get along.
Oh, okay, never mind then. That's one good thing I have with my wife. We have very similar religious beliefs, and we've read a lot of the similar things. So it works out pretty well tolerant, I would say. Um, what else? But your parents didn't teach you from day one that there's a God, there's a devil, angels, and all this kind of stuff. You didn't get that?
Nope.
Okay, that's what I got when I was little. My wife actually did not get that because her parents were first generation Chinese immigrants, or Singaporean Chinese immigrants. And her mother sent her to church, but with no instructions, just like, you can go. And that was it. And she did her faith through that way. But when I was little, I was taught from the moment that I could speak about God, devil, angels, we'll use the word mythology generally here because it applies pretty good. And all of that stuff is the absolute fact. Why did this person die? He was a sinner. Why did this happen? Oh, it's part of God's plan and this kind of stuff. And what you might not understand is to a very religious person or somebody that was raised that way, that's the mechanics of their world. Like the mechanics of why and how things happen are just bear nothing in common with the mechanics of how and why things happen the way you see it.
Mm. So I mean, I guess to some degree, and that's I mean, what I think that is telling about this indoctrination bit about religion now is that there's not a whole hell of a lot of people in the world who were atheists by birth and then became religious because they discovered some great truth and spirituality. Most people are religious, whatever religion, because they grew up in that society, in that family. So I think that casts doubt on pretty much. It's like being religious is a self-fulfilling prophecy and continues for its own sake, and it's a closed system.
It makes sense that way. As much as I don't like to say things like that, you don't see, like you said, too many people coming over here. I'll just use the example: Soviet Russia again, no religion, and they go to church and like, oh, I'm saved. Everything's taken care of now.
Mm.
Or similar from other countries. Where was I going to go with this? I lost my train of thought so hard just now.
I think we're both having massive brain farts tonight.
No, well, it's a very ad hoc commentary. What did we have, like, we were just on Twitter. It's like, let's do the commentary. Yeah, let's do it right now.
Right now, do it live,
Yeah.
Bill O'Reilly style.
Hmm. But, yeah, not too many people come from a different background to find a different family. I mean, it happens. It happens. Sure that you could find millions of people, but percentage-wise, it's fairly small.
Exactly, and I think it's just a vestigial. It's like a vestigial mental organ almost, in my opinion. And again, I don't mean to like trash on any of your beliefs, but I think that it sort of fulfills the function of filling in the scientific gaps that people don't understand. But generally, it persists not by and it's almost genetic how it's passed on. Your kid's either going to be your religion or an atheist. That's typically statistically how it happens. They
Almost assuredly, it's not likely that there will be a different path.
Yeah, I mean, when you grow up, when you encounter something as supposedly life changing as religion, you're either going to accept it or reject it. You're not just going to go, I'll pick Buddhism or some shit. So it's like, I mean, actually, I don't mean Buddhism shit. I actually have a lot of respect for Buddhism, especially Zen. But what's it called? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you're either going to accept or reject your parents' religion or your society's religion, and that's how.
Well, so I think a lot of people reject it just because they don't like their parents, or what I'm going to liken this to Reddit, because obviously you get on Reddit. I saw you.
All the time,
okay.
all the time.
I comment very little. Like just recently started. I have a bunch of accounts, one public and a couple of other junk accounts, but I don't normally sign in. I just read what's ever on the front page, and I hate the R Atheism section. I hate it so much, and it's not because of my faith. It just feels like the biggest circle jerk I've ever seen in my life. Like every time I get on, there's like 3 rage comics about, oh, I encountered this dumb Christian today, this dumb this, and it feels like everybody on there is like, my parents made me go to vacation Bible school. I'm gonna rage all over this internet. You don't You don't see them bashing on Islam. You don't see them telling that Jews are all terrible people, or just in the same kind of level. It makes my brain want to explode.
Yeah,
the reason I sign in now is so that I can take all that junk off my page.
Yeah, I mean, our atheism is fucking the biggest pity party shithole I've ever seen. I mean, I was subscribed to it for a long time, but I mean, there's only so many posts about, Facebook crap. It's all the Facebook drama is what gets to be the most, because these people, in order to have an interaction with somebody on Facebook, you have to add them. And once you add them, even if you just add them to save face, you can block them. So they can't comment on your posts, and they can't see your shit, and you can't see theirs. So these people who get all the karma horrors on Reddit for their Facebook posts are just asking for it. They're bringing the torture upon themselves, and all the our atheism kids jerk off to it, and it's pathetic, and I hate it.
Yep.
It aggravates me so much. I think the day I unsubscribed from that was the day there was like there's a person who wrote a Christian poem on Facebook, and then the guy wrote a poem back and posted it on Reddit, and I was just like, nope, done with this place. Turned around, walking.
It's not like an astonishing thing. It's like we're on Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook. Let's find a Christian. Okay, let's find a stupid one. There's plenty of stupid people. If you want to flip like a dumb atheist, I need to do no further than to look into the comment section of the video that just uploaded, and I have people telling me God is bullshit, but they can't spell.
Yeah, that doesn't.
It's like, you're not helping, bro. Definitely not changing my mind. And the same, the other way around. Somebody will try and prove something of a religious nature. Normally, like, this scientific fact proves that Noah's flood, whatever. And it's like a giant wall of text with no periods or anything. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just bad preaching. Like either not, it's like people on both ends of the preachy spectrum who don't know what the fuck they're doing. And I think that it all goes back once again to just people. No matter what you say scientifically, you're never going to scientifically prove there's a man in the sky or on another plane or somewhere. It just has to make sense to you, and it has to work for you.
yep. Whew. We have really burned through a lot of commentary here tonight. This actually went pretty good, especially how I was expecting you to just completely rail me because you're like the philosopher commentator on YouTube, and here I am with no preparation. Like, damn it, it's religion talk time.
Well, I mean, I think I self-defeat because I'm a subjectivist, and as hard as I try, I can't destroy your system because you have a system that works for you, and I can say that I can show you the psychological roots of why you're a Christian. If I had that atomistic knowledge, I could point out to every single atom shifting and how that made your neurotransmitters.
You probably don't need atoms for that with enough. Yeah, well, you could
Yeah.
from what I probably told you, you could pick up enough information to put all that together.
I mean, like it's just your encounters with religion. I mean, what it sounds like to me is that you've had certain experiences with church and with religion in your life that have led you to not abandon your religion altogether, but to take out a lot of parts of it, or not believe in a lot of parts of it that might find objectionable or cause problems for you mentally. And that's a human thing. That's like it's to remove cognitive dissonance. So you're a Christian, but you realize that a lot of it is, just this trouble making crap, and you've sort of backed off on that.
It's often more times the people than the teachings. I know that most of the time in my religion, what gets hit on a lot is the Old Testament, and there's a lot of the very Old Testament that is some of the oldest human writings around, and Lord only knows what it looked like in its original form. Literally, probably the Lord is the only person that knows, if he exists, in your opinion, of course. And even then, like, one of the things that Jesus did is he wanted to junk a lot of the Old Testament. He says this isn't right. Even if you don't see Jesus as divine, and part of the divinity was changing the laws. Like, he was the person to come to announce to change the laws, and even if not, he was trying to change the laws. Because there was stuff that was just ridiculous, and some of the really ridiculous things you have to put into context, like the don't eat pork and don't eat shellfish. It was just put in the Bible because it was unclean food, because back in the day they really couldn't prepare it right, and it really could make you sick because they didn't know how to cook it, and stuff like you don't wear coats of mixed, what is it, the coats of mixed fabric and stuff like that.
It's some type of fabric that you can't
But
wear.
do you know why?
No, I actually never read up on that. I just
See, that's
dismissed it.
important. It was because if I'm trying not to pull this out of my ass here, but it's been so long. Typically back in the day, they would judge your status based on your coat, and coats of certain colors or stripes and other things like that would be made from different materials. So the rule was you don't wear coats of different materials so that you can't flaunt your wealth. And there was this other thing that I remember a little bit better, that you're not allowed to braid your hair, which doesn't make any sense at all. But in the context of the day, since men couldn't flaunt their wealth, what they would do is they'd make their wives these little hair braids, and they'd just put buttloads of really crazy jewels and stuff in it. So, your wife is dressed really pretty. You must be a very important and wealthy man, and that kind of stuff. So the rule is you don't braid your hair. It's not about the hair. It's about what would that be a sin of? Pride, I suppose.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all about reducing pride and just sort of just
Which is why the
show
social
offiness.
context of a lot of these old things is very, very important.
Mm. And I mean, when you said that I didn't come on here and destroy you, I mean, I can show. I mean, I think that you and I both have a good head on our shoulders when it comes to seeing how, like, the social context and the psychological context of people has just made religion into what it is today, and made you and I into the atheist and Christian that we are today. So
Yeah.
and I mean, but at the end of the day, even if I can show you down to the atomistic level how you became who you are, and that it didn't really involve God. It just involved the materials in your brain. That, I mean, it still works for you to have this sort of liberal Christian belief, or this progressive Christian belief.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, I'm not out to destroy people because, I mean, there's no way I can do it at the end of the day. I can't provide you scientific fact, and therefore I have to reserve judgment at the end of the day.
Well, it's the science is definitely on your side. The Occam's razor, like, there's a giant pink unicorn sitting in my room right now. You can't really disprove it.
Mm.
It's one of those things. One of my favorite posts that I actually saw on our atheism was that all dogs can talk. They do this psychically with each other. They do it with an energy that cannot be detected. You cannot disprove this. Therefore, all dogs talk.
Yeah.
And I don't worry
The
about
Occam, the Occam's razor thing is the most telling argument I think that I've ever encountered, but or the is God an atheist argument. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing definitive, and that's I don't believe there's anything
Well,
definitive
there
about
is one
anything.
thing very definitive. Odds are very, very good. Should be 100%, but there is an off chance that one day both me and you will be completely dead, and at least our bodies will be rotting in the ground, worm food, and that sort of thing. And then we will sure as hell know who was right and who was wrong.
Or
And
somebody,
it
well,
could be
I
both
don't.
of us wrong. It could be a bunch of Mormons up in heaven, and we're sitting there in like purgatory, like, God, this sucks. I'm just floating around forever.
Mm, and that's the thing, though. If you're dead and that is the end, you can never know that you were right, which is kind of a bummer for atheists. But I suppose not much you can do about it.
Yeah, well, you don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
Wouldn't you feel like I'm sure you hear this question a lot. Like, wouldn't you feel like a douche if you die, and then you wake up in maybe not even a Christian heaven, but some sort of religious supernatural afterlife, and you're like, you got to be fucking kidding me. This is a joke, right?
I don't know if I'd react like that or if I would just say, well, I did the best I could with what I had, and I fucked up.
Yeah.
But
All right, we got to end this commentary. This is getting ridiculous. It's going to be like 2 gigabytes when I render this thing out.
oh goodness. But all right, so I guess this has been obviously Jesus and Drifter, and this was a good talk. I liked it. We should do
Yeah,
this more often.
definitely, definitely,
Although I'll be in Arizona having a life-changing orgy with shellfish.
dude. Flagstaff is nice. I love Flagstaff.
Although it's probably cold as balls right now.
I'd tell you to give it a go. It's really not that bad.
All right, well I will make my way up there.
All right, cool.
All right.